The chair of our board isn't here, and he was originally planning to be here. The impact of a snap election reaches far and wide. Sir Andrew sends his apologies for the beginning of the meeting. He is attending the swearing in of the new Lord Chancellor, which is happening as we speak, and he does hope to be with us later on. But I am going to read what he would have said to you by way of kicking off the proceedings. So, first of all, thank you all for coming to hear and discuss the next steps on future bar training. I'm pleased to see such a wide audience, including members of the bar, training providers, academics, students and others. The regulation of bar training is of paramount importance, and we're pleased to see so many people are engaging with our FBD programme. Our consultation last year received over 1,000 responses. And those responses helped to shape our decision to authorise a limited number of alternative routes to training and highlighted other areas of work that we will assess in our reform programme. Now, we've deliberately designed this evening so that we're listening to other people rather than doing all the talking ourselves. So all our external speakers will be offering their own views and not those of the Bar Standards Board. The way that future barristers train for the bar is crucial in ensuring that they can meet the needs of the public. We aim for a system in the future which meets those needs. We want to see training that's more accessible, more flexible, more affordable, but that sustains high standards at the same time. We want to see a competitive and sustainable training market which ensures that students continue to enjoy a choice of high-quality training providers. So we need your perspectives to help guide our reforms. Now, as you'll have seen from the agenda, we want to explore with you some elements of the reform programme, including, for example, what a new authorisation framework is going to look like so that we can assess future training routes, thinking about the teaching of ethics, both in the classroom and how this is applied in practice, and we want your views on the future regulation of pupillage. We look forward to hearing from all our speakers and very much hope that our audience, both here in this room and via Facebook, won't hesitate to offer their own views too. I'd now like to welcome Justine Davidge to explain more about the Future Bar Training Programme. Justine herself is a barrister and is chair of the board's Education and Training Committee.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Good evening, and as Vanessa has said, thank you very much for joining us at this event on such a ludicrously hot day in only marginally cooler circumstances in this room. I was saying a few minutes earlier that I was at the Financial Conduct Authority this morning, and as regulators go, they clearly have a much bigger air conditioning budget. It was pretty nippy. But just by way of introduction, for those of you who don't know me, I am a barrister member of the Bar Standards Board. I have been chair of both the Education and Training Committee and the Future Bar Training Programme Board since January. I have practised criminal and regulatory law at the self-employed bar since 2001. I have previously taught law at undergraduate level and also ethics and advocacy on the BPTC. I have acted as a mentor for many BPTC students and prospective pupils. I'm an advocacy trainer with my IN and a moot judge. I was head of pupillage and recruitment within my chambers for a number of years as well. And I give this potted history just simply to explain that as chair of the committees dealing with FBT, I'm no particular expert in any particular aspect of bar education and training, but I do have practical experience of all of them. My role this evening is simply to provide you with an overview of the FBT programme, specifically how it is governed, the principles that guide its work, its main areas of focus, and the projected timeline for the programme. At the end of this brief summary, there will be a brief opportunity to ask myself and Vanessa any questions you may have on those matters before we move on to the main substance of tonight's programme, which is obviously looking at three specific aspects of FBT: the development of the authorisation framework, the review of how ethics is taught, and the review of pupillage. As you will all appreciate, FBT is a very substantial programme. It involves a number of significant challenges, and it might therefore be legitimate for you to ask, how does the BSB operate FBT? The slide behind me shows the governance structure for the project. At the bottom, we have the individual project teams, and I will come on later to explain that the BSB has divided the FBT programme into 6 more manageable projects, each dealing with a specific topic. These teams are made up of BSB staff and supplemented by expert assistance from members of APEX. That's an advisory pool of experts maintained by the BSB. These comprise members of the bar and individuals from other disciplines who have expertise relevant to our work. And it is also supplemented by an ad hoc task and finish groups as and when required, and these examine particular discrete issues. Again, these groups comprise a mix of both members of the profession and lay members as appropriate. And whenever possible, representatives of those who use barristers' services are also included. The work of the individual project teams is overseen on a daily basis by the executive management team with responsibility for FBT. This team is led by Vanessa Davies, as is shown on the slide under the heading Executive. At the top of the slide, we have the board of the BSB, which is ultimately responsible for all decisions made in respect of the policy and the operation of the FBT programme. And in between the board and the executive, we have the committee and the programme board that I chair. The FBT programme board and the Education and Training Committee both play a key part in ensuring that the programme keeps on track, and we report directly to the BSB board as to its progress. On the slide, you will see that that committee and that board have been grouped together. However, they do have distinct roles, and their membership does not wholly overlap. Judith, Anne and Nigel are members of the Education and Training Committee only, and Deverell is a member of the programme board only. The Education and Training Committee is concerned with ensuring the rigour of policy proposals made during the development and the implementation of the programme. Matters of policy are discussed and debated at Education and Training Committee meetings. Their soundness may be challenged, and thereafter, when the Education and Training Committee are confident that what is being proposed is the best policy solution, the committee makes recommendations to the BSB board. The programme board, on the other hand, holds the members of the executive managing both the entire programme and the individual project teams to account. The board's remit is to ensure that the work is of a high quality standard, that timelines are met, that risks are considered appropriately, and that the programme has sufficient resources dedicated to it. As what I've already said about membership will indicate, there is continuity across these bodies and also between them and the BSB board. So as well as myself, Alison, Roland, Judith and Anne are all BSB board members. Vanessa has overall oversight of the executive team working on FBT, and this ensures that there is constant communication across all parts of the organisation about the programme's progress and any issues that arise. The next slide, now showing, outlines how the Bar Standards Board approaches its policy decision making in respect of FBT. Fundamentally, all decisions are taken in line with the 4 guiding principles that our work has so far demonstrated must be the cornerstone of reforming the current education and training system. The 4 principles listed evolved from the results of our previous consultations. They have guided and will continue to guide all work on the FBT programme. The principles are improving accessibility. We would all agree, I'm sure, that it is paramount for the best candidates to be able to train as barristers and for the bar as a whole to better reflect the communities it serves. Secondly, improving upon affordability. A paramount concern regarding bar training has always been how to bring down the cost to students. Though this should not be seen in purely monetary terms, affordability is also about changing the cost-to-risk ratio for students so that the investment they make in terms of both time and money is more likely to be of direct benefit to them. Encouraging greater flexibility is next, and flexibility is necessary in order to ensure that the system encourages and enables innovation in how education and training is delivered, and the previous 2 objectives of improving accessibility and affordability are met. And finally, we have maintaining high standards. It is axiomatic that any new training pathway must maintain and enhance current standards of legal training. Anything less than this would fail to protect those members of the public who have recourse to barrister services. As I mentioned earlier, the FBT programme has been separated out into 6 strands or individual projects dealing with particular aspects of bar training. These are set out on the screen behind me, and I'll just go through them briefly, one by one. The Rule Changes project. This project is about developing from first principles a new regulatory framework in order to give effect to the BSB board's decisions to adopt a new, more flexible approach to approving new training providers and indeed new training pathways. There are a number of facets to that particular programme. One is a review of the current rules. The current rules must be reviewed in order to remove any requirements that are incompatible with or unnecessary to the BSB's approach to reform. 2, drafting new rules. Other rules will therefore need to be drafted to give effect to the decisions made as to how the BSB's approach is to be implemented. 3, a further part of the process will involve consultation on any set of new rules before we formally apply to the LSB for their approval. I will move on to timelines in a few minutes, but we aim to consult on the new rules in autumn of this year and to make an application to the LSB early next year, possibly in March. Before consulting on any rules and our authorisation framework, the BSB must be satisfied that they are desirable from the perspective of meeting the LSB's regulatory objectives. It must also consider the extent to which they are compatible with best regulatory practice. The BSB must also have regard to the statutory guidance that was issued by the Legal Services Board on education and training following the Legal Education and Training Review recommendations. The Education and Training Committee will be considering the scope of the proposed consultation next month, and the Education and Training Committee will then review the documents in September before they are published. Then we have the Authorisation Framework project. The development of an authorisation framework, as you will all be very much aware, is essential to the implementation and operation of FBT reforms. The framework will set out what the BSB expects to see from training providers based on the 4 guiding principles outlined earlier, how the BSB will make decisions on authorising providers and pathways, and how the BSB will make the reform system work in practice. We are very keen to make sure that the framework we design is user-friendly. We will therefore be engaging in in a collaborative process and seeking input from key stakeholders throughout. The Education and Training Committee is scheduled to review a draft of the authorisation framework, I believe, at the end of this year. The Pupillage Reform Project. In the future, pupil training will need to be designed to meet the newly defined competencies of the professional statement, which was published in 2016, as many of you will know. It will also need to be compatible with the training processes authorised through the operation of the authorisation framework. The BSB intends to roll out, on a pilot basis for 2017 to 18 intake of pupils, a new approach to assessing pupil competency with reference to the professional statement. This pilot will also test a more in-depth approach for supervision applicable to all pupillage training organisations, not just chambers. We have drafted a new supervision programme which aims to ensure that we focus on the right things when we carry out supervision visits, and it will be aligned with the new authorised framework as it develops. As part of this pilot, we will also be considering some wider questions about pupillage that emerged from the consultations we have carried out. We are in the process of inviting up to 10 pupillage training organisations to take part in the pilot. These cover a range of sizes, geographical locations and practice areas, and we intend the pilot to cover both chambers and the employed bar. The Education and Training Committee again will be considering the detail of the pilot next month, and it is intended to host a series of workshops on pupillage reform over the course of the summer. The roles of the INS project, and I hope I get a little bit of leeway from Chris. I know he's looking at me, but fingers crossed. A key component of the new training pathways we may be prepared to authorise is call to the bar. By statute, only one of the 4 Inns of Court can call someone to the bar, and the process of doing so is governed by rules set by the BSB. In our second FBT consultation last year, we said we would not seek to change this position. However, you will know, the Inn's role within our regulatory arrangements is not currently limited to simply calling individuals to the bar. For example, the Inns are responsible for a number of matters within the structure of rules set by the BSB. It is a review of these additional functions that is to be undertaken so as to establish which of them remain necessary and are appropriate in light of the new approaches to bar training, and also how the BSB's regulatory duties of oversight can best be fulfilled. Again, the Education and Training Committee will be reviewing the work so far on the project at its next meeting. The review of curriculum and assessments project. It is timely that the BSB undertakes a review of the curriculum and assessments associated with the vocational stage of training, including the teaching and assessment of professional ethics, which was the focus of concern in responses to the most recent consultation. The BSB will reconsider how much of the current BPTC curriculum needs to be prescribed and what can be left to providers' discretion. Determine which areas of training most warrant the regulatory control point of a centralised assessment, and in other areas, consider what methods of assessment are most appropriate to demonstrate that the competences of the professional statement are met. And then finally, we have the programme evaluation project. And this project effectively involves continual quality assurance of the BSB's reforms and how they are implemented. It will assess whether the aims and the objectives have been achieved, to what extent and how. And so my final slide is the upcoming timeline with some key dates on it, which you might be interested in. For example, the rule change consultation period is highlighted, running from September to December of this year. The pupillage pilot to begin in September 17 till September 18. The LSB rule change application in March 18, with a response expected in June. And the authorisation framework projected to go live in September 2018. In respect of the earliest possible date to authorise new routes of training, it's at this stage probably far too early to say exactly when that will be, but it's anticipated that the earliest possible would probably be sometime in September 2019. Now, there are a few minutes, but not many because I've run over, to ask questions about what I've just spoken about, and myself and Vanessa can deal with them if you'd like to. Do we have a mic?
We've got mics, but there are roving mics, so if you want to go down there. So if we can constrain questions now very much to the practicalities and logistics of what's just been presented, rather than the substance of the segments that we'll have shortly. It's the lady here, please.
This is a really easy question. Can we have copies of your slides
Yes.
emailed to us? Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
I'll stop writing.
Yeah, thank you. And the gentleman right behind you, Andrew.
Yes, James Petts from 36 Group. Can I ask, there's reference in relation to, I don't know whether this...
James, can you hold the mic to your...
Is this any better?
That's better, thank you.
I don't know whether this counts as substance or not, because I'm not sure precisely which bits are going to be addressed, so if this is left to later, then it will be. But there's reference, I note, in relation to the review of the Inns of Court, to asking which functions that they perform still need to be performed. May I ask, is there any consideration being given to whether or not there are further functions that they could perform, and if not, why not?
I think I would take it as axiomatic that we will look at the entirety of the functions. We review from first principles, so it must be the case that that would be what we would think about. But I wouldn't want to say anything more than that at this stage. Yeah.
Yes,
and the lady on the same row as James.
Sorry, can I just say that I would agree with what
Yeah.
Vanessa says. It's certainly something that is on the radar of the Education Training Committee.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, Annelle Smith, BPP. With regard to the pupillage pilot, I just wanted to know whether or not that will mean additional pupillage spaces being made available on which to do the pilot. And the second question I had is, basically my understanding is that part of this whole initiative is about increasing accessibility to the bar. Is any work being done with pupillage providers to address mindsets, to address ethics, to address barriers that might be causing them to be very narrow in terms of applications they consider?
So thank you for that. Can I ask that we park your second question, which is a very important question, to the segment where we're discussing pupillage, because I think that it will be a very live question. So I would ask you to perhaps ask it again. As to whether the pilot will create any more pupillages, I don't think the pilot per se will do do so. Because even to participate in the pilot, somebody has got to be a pupillage training organisation. Obviously, we're hoping through the increased flexibility of the entirety of the system that will in itself create more possibilities for people to get the kind of work-based training that they need in order to qualify fully. Justine, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I was just going to say I did actually have a paragraph addressing that exact point in my notes, but I cut it because I was given a yellow card. So I'm grateful to Vanessa for covering it. Thank you.
Okay. One more. Duncan.
Yes, Duncan McComb, Chairman of the Young Barristers Committee of the Bar Council. I was just wondering, this may also be dealt with later, but what exactly is being piloted in the pupillage pilot? Because this is only the second time I've heard of it, and they haven't had any detail yet.
Okay, so I think if you don't mind, Duncan, it would be great if we can deal with that when we deal with the pupillage segment. And if your answers, if you don't get a proper answer to your question there, we'll make sure that you've got comprehensive information describing the pilot, which we can do by other means, if that's all right. Thank you.